Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Woodward. I am going to be your host today. We are doing the forecasting webinar today. It's always a good one. It's one of my favorite areas just due to the complexity of it. A lot of the other ones are pretty cut and dry, but in terms of forecasting, there's so much to consider. So this should be very beneficial to you. So I hope you enjoy. Now, just as a reminder, we are recording this webinar, and I will show you where the webinar will be, where you can view the recording, and where you can sign for future webinars after we're done talking. If you have any generic questions related to forecasting that may apply to multiple people here, please let me know. Type me a question in the question pane, and we'll get to that after we go over the topic. Just as a reminder, if it's a specific question, please reach out to our support team at 877-477-8787 or through our email at support@capsim.com. All right, so let's get going. And just as a reminder, we are using the capstone simulation today. If you're in the foundation simulation, your reports are going to look a little different. You're going to have a few differences, but the process of the forecast remains the same. Okay, so the application will be there. All right, so as we get into things, I have a simulation that I am in round 3. Okay, so there's a few years to where I've started to work on a strategy where my competition, a few computer teams, have started to work their strategy as well. Okay, in the early part, there's not a lot of information available that's going to indicate what those teams may do. Okay, so there are going to be some assumptions and a little bit of guesswork. But that's with anything, with any new competitor. You're not going to know exactly what to expect until you have some proof, some results from them. All right, now before we begin, why is forecasting important? Really 2 reasons. One, the forecast number is what your production team will see on the production page. So when they're top line on the production page, they're going to see unit sales forecast. When they see that, that should be an indication of how many units they need to make available through production and through inventory. Okay. Secondly, and this is probably even more important, is that the forecast number establishes your performance. Okay. So, for example, if I were to log into my web spreadsheet, and if I were to make a sales forecast, and I'm just going to type in a number here, assume that there were numbers in all of these, for example. If there's zeros, it's going to use a benchmark prediction. We're going to talk about that. But those numbers is what makes up this number. Okay, so without an accurate forecast, your finance team is going to struggle to make sure that everything looks good financially, that they know how much to borrow, how much to possibly offer as dividends, how much things they could retire early, what they could do with their payables and receivables. There's so many things that they can do, but unless they have a good relevant starting point, it's going to be very difficult for them. Okay, so we're going to talk about various methods of developing a forecast. We're going to talk about how to calculate segment demand, how to calculate product demand. We're going to be looking at a few key pieces of information on the Courier report, which is the same as the Fast Track, as well as some information that you can utilize from the Industry Conditions report, which is also going to be useful. Okay, so first off, I am going to go to the high-tech segment. Okay. The reason being, I normally would talk traditional, but in this case, my strategy is not to be a major factor there. Okay, so therefore, it's not going to do me much good. Okay, but for this example, first part, you need to know how big the segment demand is. So what you're provided here is last year's demand, which in this case, 3,448, and you're also provided how fast the segment grows. Okay, so to calculate that, you would take your 3448, which was last year's demand, and you can multiply it by 1 point and then the growth rate, 162. And that's going to give me essentially 4,007 as my sales forecast for the year. Okay, so once you have that number, go ahead and set that aside. And here is where you do the hard part of the process, where you calculate how many units you expect to sell, or to try to figure out what expected market share you would use, which you will then use that 4,007 number, which we just calculated. Okay, now couple ways to come up with a starting point for a forecast. Okay, first off, you're provided every year on your report how much you sold last year. Okay, so for example, I could say, well, I sold 22% last year, maybe I will sell 22% again. So I take 22% times it by that 4,007 number, and that, assuming my market share stays at constant from last year, that could be what I would expect for this year, and I'd put that as a forecast. Okay, now, in some cases, if there were some stockouts in a segment, then I would not want to use my actual market share. And let me look to see if I can find an instance of a good product stocking out. Okay, perfect. One of my products in the size segment, I ended up stocking out. Okay, I sold 874 units for 31% of the market. Okay, however, if you ever see a stock out, look at this chart, the actual versus potential. That's going to indicate if those lines are uneven, that either I sold more than I should have, or I should have sold more. I stocked out. If the red line is higher, that was a stock out. So what I would then do is I would disregard my 31% because that number is pretty irrelevant, and I would go down to my market share report, and I would see that instead I should have got 38.6% of the market. Okay, so I would use 38.6% times by that segment's next year demand, okay, using the same process that we came up with the high-tech segment, and that could be a starting point for my forecast there. Okay, now, another way, and I'm going to give some insight as to why this method could be better than the ones I just mentioned. Okay, one, we understand the weakness of the actual is it just happened to be what did occur, not necessarily what may occur moving forward. Okay. All right. Now, in terms of the potential market share, is what that number provides is simply what occurred over the past 12 months. A lot of times in the simulation, things will change. Okay. In fact, more often than not, they're going to change. If you were selling a product that doesn't do revisions very often, that doesn't change marketing strategy, pricing strategy a lot, then you can kind of follow market trends. Okay, I like to use the example of Oreos. Honestly, they tasted the same, for as far back as I remember them. I don't see significant changes in their price or in the quality of the components that go into the product. Okay, therefore, market trend may be very beneficial, but since we're talking electronics, we're talking about a sensor where the demand is always changing, I would be more interested in how my product is currently sold, meaning maybe how it did yesterday, last month. I'd be a little bit more curious in that than how my product did over the past 12 months. And the market share, actual or potential, doesn't give me a breakdown of when I sold, how much I sold in January versus how much I sold in December. So what you can use for this and what we have provided for you is your December customer survey score. Okay? This is a evaluation of how your product did in December. So it's very recent information. So how to incorporate that number is you add up your survey score numbers, So 77 plus 33 plus 39 plus 39 plus 7. Okay, anything that has a number I'm going to factor in. So I get 195. What I then do is I take my number, 77, divided by the 195, and essentially what that says is in December I got 39.5, so essentially 39.5% of the market. Okay, in which case then I would take my market share, or not my market share, my 2776 number, adding the growth rate, and then I take 39.5%, and that could be, again, my starting point. Okay, a more recent starting point. Okay, now I say starting point because there's more can be done. Okay, now it's not to say you couldn't do well and go with a 39.5%, okay, because it's a good starting point. However, the survey score has no idea what's going to happen on January 1st of next year. Okay, products have the ability to change their price day one of the year. They have the ability to change their promotion strategy, their sales budgets. They can change all those. Okay, products, the ideal spots change. Okay, products can change in MTBF very quickly. So there needs to be more analysis of what may occur in the upcoming year. Okay, so a couple places that I always recommend you take a look at on your report. Okay, first off, page 4. This is your production analysis page. This will show you any product that could be new. So for example, you have a Fox product, there's a Doom product, and I have one of mine. So there's 3 new products that are going to come into play. Now there is a difference between the information you see. First off, you see what Fox is. Fox clearly has a high-tech design at this point in time. Hasn't sold yet, so it wasn't something to be factored in yet. However, because it has a past revision date, okay, because we're December 31st and that came out about 3 weeks ago, that product will sell day one of the year. So it could be a significant competitor. So you must factor that product in, try to figure out what percent of the market it's going to steal, because it will impact you. Okay. Now on the other hand, Doom and Arch, you don't know what they are, but you do know when they enter the market, how much they could produce in a full year. So you may not know where they're going, but you can know how much they could produce in the remainder of the year they have left. And you can kind of glean maybe a little bit from how late the revision date in the year as to what the design could be. Okay, and you need to play around a little bit in R&D to know that. Okay, other things that may impact you, anything you see in the future, future revision date can impact you. Okay, if someone sells capacity, maybe they can't produce what they sold last year. That was important information. Okay, the next thing I always recommend is to take a look at your perceptual maps. Over time, products are going to move. They're not going to always be in the exact same spot as where they begin, because teams are going to do strategies where if you're dealing with computers or if you're dealing with classmates, they're all going to do different things. Okay, so track the products, track your competitors, see where they were, see where they are, and use that information to try to glean where they may be going. Okay, so for example, Buddy and Bold, Buddy started down here. Bold started down over here. Okay, round 1, if I were to go back to my round 1 courier, you would see that Bold was about here, Buddy was about here. So they're transitioning year 0, round 1, round 2. If they were to follow that trend, it would significantly impact this segment as well as the segments where they were. Okay, so track those products because that will impact you. Okay, because Buddy sold in this segment last year, but if they follow that trend, they may not. So you may want to lower your expectations for that segment and anticipate a new competitor. Okay, that information can be valuable. Okay, now once you have all that, you try to factor in how the perceptual map, how the information on page 4 is going to affect your starting point. Okay, you could also look at a segment and say, for example, I'm at 99% awareness. There's not a lot of room for improvement. Therefore, if my competition keeps on increasing at the rate they were going to, my market share may go down, simply because I can't improve anymore as much as what my competition can. Therefore, like I said, market share may go down. Okay. Also, when you're looking at things, you've got to take a look at the buying criteria. So, for example, if, being that the age is 29% of what's important, and it's at 1.5, for example, if there was a competitor that was a little bit underage, meaning about 1 to 1.2, somewhere in that range, as the year progresses, they're going to get better. Whereas my product, being slightly overage, as the year goes on, until, of course, at any revision, my product may get a little worse. Okay, that would impact your market share. Okay, so watch for pricing trends. If everyone does similar things with pricing, if you want to maintain market share in that regard, then you must do the same. Or if you want to increase your market share, you could drop your price. If you want higher margins and sell less, then of course increase your price. Okay, so look for any trends, any information that can be very valuable for you. Okay, if you see teams always stocking out, you can make the assumption maybe they're going to stock out again, or maybe eventually they'll figure it out and you're not going to pick up their sales that they may have lost. So product analysis, competitive analysis, anything you do looking at this report is going to be beneficial. Okay, now that's the things you're going to find on your Courier report. Okay, but your industry conditions report has a few pieces of information that could be valuable. So, for example, for every segment you see, and usually these pop out. Apparently mine is not working, but for example, it shows you exactly how your product is going to do at various positionings within the segment or at various age profiles. So, same thing with, like I mentioned, with the age. Give me one moment here. Is that you can see how various ages, when they get too old, can impact you, or again, the competitor that's a little bit underage. You could see roughly how much they could impact you, and of course, you would kind of incorporate their segments' importance for the age. Okay, because that again, that can impact you. Okay, now one other key tool. Once you have a good forecast in there, and I'm going to say 2,500 sales for my low tech at a price of $20. I'm just going to change a few things. Okay, what you're provided a benchmark prediction. So after you have a forecast in there, this is where you can play around with this function. Okay, never ever use it as a forecast because we clearly state it is not all that valuable. But it's useful playing around with price or your promotions, as well as sales budgets, of course. So what you can see is you want to see how much your bottom line is affected, okay? Because your goal is not to sell more than your competitor, probably. Your goal is probably to make money. You are a business after all. So you want to see this number increase. So for example, I'm going to take that number 25,528, and I promise we're almost done. We'll get to some questions, and if we go over a few minutes, I don't mind. Okay, I'm willing to answer any questions that remain. So I'm trying to make this number increase. So for example, if I were to drop my price, okay, I want to see how much this number is affected. So $33.89 was $20, but at $15, it's significantly higher. Okay, naturally, lower price is going to garner more demand. So I'm curious as to how much it increased. So 51.84 minus where my benchmark was, 33.89, that increased by 1,795 units. Now, that's not to say I'm going to increase my forecast by 1,795 because, again, this number is useless in and of itself. So how much percent-wise is this an improvement over where my benchmark was? So I'm going to take that number divided by my 33.89, and what that's saying is I can expect about 53% more sales at $15 than at $20. So what I then do is I take my 53% improvement and add it to my forecast. Okay, so if it's 53%, I'm going to take 2,500 and times it by 1.53. That's going to say 3,800 sales in 25. So if 3825 in this case makes this number go above where it was, which was the 25,500, in other words, I can make the assumption that it would be better for my company to have a lower price and sell more. Okay, now in this case, it didn't quite work out. Okay, it depends a lot upon how important price is, how important to each of the various segments, because it is different, as well as how your margins are. Okay, if they're higher margins, maybe dropping your price could be beneficial. If your margins are low anyway, then dropping your price, in fact, may hurt you. But nonetheless, that's how to incorporate this number. Okay, now I guess one more thing, and I apologize, in terms of forecasting for a new product, because we get a lot of questions for those, there are a couple things to consider. Okay, first off, you know what your product is, and you know what segment it's going into. Okay, you are not provided last year's sales or a customer survey score because it didn't sell last year. But what you can do is you can compare it maybe to one of its competitors, okay, as well as what you can do, let me go to my report, is you can figure out what kind of weaknesses or advantages would a new product have. Okay, in high tech, where the product where the segment I'm going to, when it enters a market, it's going to be pretty well positioned, so I'm going to get a lot of points there. My age is going to be cutting edge because it's brand new, which is going to give me an advantage over my competition. Okay, and of course I'd factor in MTBF and price, so I'd factor in all those. But the downsides or the weaknesses of a new product is, one, it doesn't come out day one of the year most likely, so you're going to miss out on a large portion. Second thing is, while you do get a little bit of free awareness from a new product, it's doubtful, or it's very unlikely that you're going to have the same customer awareness as products that have been out in the segment already. Okay, so time and awareness are your main enemies, okay, on forecasting these new products, but you're going to get some advantages, okay, if the positioning is good or the age works out. So you need to factor those in. Okay, so again, compare it with something similar and then try to figure out how its strengths and weaknesses are going to affect it. Okay, and forecasting a new product is hard, but after 1 year, you'll have a survey score where you can base it off of. Okay, you'll have last year's sales. Now, of course, it's going to be limited by the amount of time it's available to sell in that year, but nonetheless, utilize that information. Okay, now a couple things before we get to your questions. Actually, one more thing. Under your help menu, your online guide, just as a takeaway, under team member guide, there is some forecasting information under here, left-hand menu over here, forecasting number 10. There's some information. There are various ways of doing a forecast. It goes over best case and worst case scenario, which we didn't go over today. Okay, that is important. Okay, just because of time, I couldn't go over everything. Okay, in fact, I already went way too long, so I apologize. But I would definitely reference best case and worst case, or call our support team if you have any questions there. All right, so let's get to some questions. All right, let's see. All right, there's a question. Let me just go ahead and read it. It says, if, for example, you have automated heavily and expect to be able to drop price, should you forecast a higher market share? Okay, first off, if you automate, yeah, you can drop the price. You definitely should expect a higher market share. It depends, however, on what segment we're talking about. Okay, in segments where it's of higher importance, it will give you more benefit. Okay, so utilize the that benchmark prediction number to aid in how much that could benefit you. Okay, and then another question: which is better for starting point, market share or customer survey score? If the market has not changed a lot, no new products, every product is undergoing similar revisions, potential market share can be very, very valuable. It's not. I'm not trying to take away from that number. In a market where there's a lot of transition, maybe late revisions in the year where last year's results don't necessarily reflect that very well, survey score could be an advantage. Now, I would always calculate both. Okay, if the numbers agree with each other, meaning your customer survey score indicates about 35%, and last year's sales were about 35%, then you got a number that kind of validates each other. Okay. Now, again, simply starting points, but nonetheless, the more information that you have available, the better. Okay. All right. Let's see. A couple more questions. How do I know if competitors are entering or exiting a segment? Okay. The best thing for that is evaluate them. Okay. Evaluate their products, how they're sitting on the perceptual map. Okay. Try to figure out how the product has been doing. If you see a product that's struggling and its demand is lowering over time, then use that information, because perhaps if they go from 500 sales to 200 sales down to 100, then maybe they're totally gone next year and they discern that their product is unviable. That is just not going to make money. Okay, but really those two things should help there. Okay. What drives product demand? Okay. Anything, and let me just show you. If I were to go to a segment, okay, anything from the buying criteria, okay, awareness, accessibility, spending, that definitely impacts you. If TQM, which we'll talk about, I believe next week, is incorporated, that will definitely impact you. Okay, your receivable policy can also impact you. Okay, I would look up accounts receivable in your online guide, and I believe you go to the second result there, and that will provide you how that could impact you. Okay, so those are pretty much the things that can impact you. Okay, let's see here. Okay. All right, let's give it one more minute to see if any more questions pop up. And I apologize again for going long. Okay, now just while we wait, in case any questions do come in, let's show you where you can view this recording. And it usually is posted about 24 hours after we do the webinar. So in other words, it'll be midday tomorrow. So capsum.com, not contact, I apologize, but it's actually useful because that's where our contact information is, what I mentioned at the beginning. Okay. However, for this example, I want to go to events. All right, I apologize. I think we just lost audio for a moment, so hopefully you didn't miss too much. Let me just recap. So I went to Capsum.com, and then I clicked on Events. Okay, I am trying to show where the where you can record, or not record, where you can view the webinars that the one we're doing today, old webinars where you can sign up for future ones. So underneath the image, webinars, student webinars, and you have your recordings for everyone we've done so far. Okay. If you want to sign up for a future one, you click on the link, one for next week perhaps, for production. Click on the link, first name, last name, and the email. If you put in a valid email, you'll get a reminder. Okay. If not, then it's up to you, and good luck finding it. However, this is where you can sign up for those future webinars. Okay. Now, again, I apologize. Let me bring that window back. Okay. On our homepage, contact. Again, if you have any questions relating to today's webinar, relating to anything, technical issues, general questions, support email, phone numbers. Please reach out to us if you have any needs. Again, I thank you for attending. Hopefully this has been beneficial. I find forecasting I find it enjoyable. It's difficult, okay, but you're going to get a lot more out of understanding your competition when you really get into those reports and where you really do some good calculations. So, good luck. And please attend our future webinars and give us a call if you have any questions. All right. Good luck, everyone.